My wife mocked me for being broke. Then I bought the house she lost after her divorce, and she didn't recognize me at first. When she laughed and called me broke in front of a room full of strangers, something inside me went quiet instead of breaking. It wasn't the kind of silence that brings peace. It was the kind that settles deep in your chest, like a door slowly closing on a life you thought you knew. But that moment came much later. Back then, my life was simple in the way quiet lives often are. I woke up before sunrise, brewed cheap coffee that always smelled slightly burnt, and sat at our small kitchen table scrolling through job emails on my phone while the radiator clicked and hissed like it was clearing its throat. Our apartment was nothing special. Beige walls, thin carpets that never quite lost the smell of old detergent, but it felt like home because she was there. Maya used to pad into the kitchen barefoot, hair tangled from sleep, stealing sips from my mug even though she complained about how bitter I made it. "You'll ruin your stomach," she'd say, but she always smiled when she said it. We'd been married 6 years by then. No kids yet. We talked about it sometimes, usually late at night when the city outside softened into a distant hum. We'd lie in bed and imagine what a second bedroom might look like, a crib by the window, stuffed animals lined up like little guards. I worked in logistics for a regional distributor. Steady hours, modest pay, predictable stress. It wasn't glamorous, but it covered the rent, groceries, and allowed us to put a little aside each month. Maya bounced between jobs, boutique sales, a short-lived marketing internship, a wellness startup that folded in 3 months. She always had big ideas and restless energy, and I admired that about her. "Once I find my thing," she'd say, tapping her fingers on the counter, eyes bright, "we're gonna fly." I believed her, or maybe I wanted to. I handled most of the finances, not because I was controlling, it just naturally fell that way. I paid the bills online during lunch breaks. I tracked our savings in a small spreadsheet that made me feel oddly proud when the numbers nudged upward. Maya said numbers stressed her out. "Just tell me if we're okay," she'd laugh, tossing her purse onto the couch. "I trust you." And for a long time, we were okay. Friday nights were takeout nights. We'd spread cardboard boxes across the coffee table and argue about what show to binge. She liked loud competition shows. I liked slow documentaries. We compromised badly and watched both. Sometimes she'd sit with her legs tucked under her, absent-mindedly tracing circles on my arm while scrolling her phone. The faint scent of her citrus shampoo would cling to the couch cushions long after she went to bed. Those little details made me feel anchored, safe. The first shift was so small I almost missed it. Maya started guarding her phone more closely. It was subtle, flipping its screen down when she stood up, carrying it into the bathroom, keeping it tucked under a pillow at night. I told myself everyone did that. Privacy wasn't betrayal. Then there were the casual comments. "Do you ever feel like we're stuck?" she asked one night, stirring pasta that had gone slightly mushy. I shrugged. "Stuck how? Same apartment, same routines, same paycheck cycle?" She forced a smile. "I just thought we'd be further along by now." The words lingered between us like steam. I tried to lighten it. "We're building, slowly." She nodded, but her eyes drifted away, toward the window, towards something I couldn't see. A week later, I noticed the savings account balance was lower than expected. Not drastically, a few thousand gone. I assumed I'd misremembered. Maybe a rent double charge. Maybe I'd transferred money for insurance and forgotten. I didn't bring it up. The next month, it dipped again. That time, I opened the transaction history. A few unfamiliar charges caught my eye. Cash withdrawals. A transfer labeled only with initials I didn't recognize. When I asked Maya about it, she barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, that? I moved some money to cover a short-term thing. I meant to tell you." "What kind of thing?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She waved her hand dismissively. "Just helping a friend. I'll put it back when my next paycheck hits." Something about the way she said it, fast, casual, almost rehearsed, made a faint unease settle in my stomach, but I didn't press. Marriage is built on trust, I told myself. You don't interrogate the person you love over a spreadsheet. Still, that night, the ticking of the wall clock felt louder than usual. I lay awake listening to her breathing, steady and calm, while my mind replayed the numbers again and again. I didn't yet know that this was the first crack in something that would eventually shatter my entire sense of home. The unease didn't arrive all at once. It crept in like a draft through a poorly sealed window, barely noticeable at first, then impossible to ignore once you became aware of it. Maya started coming home later than usual. Not dramatically late, just enough to shift the rhythm of our evenings. Dinner would cool on the stove while I waited. The hallway light would stay on longer. When she finally walked in, she'd smell faintly of unfamiliar perfume layered over over her citrus shampoo. Work ran long, she'd say, slipping off her shoes. Or, I met a friend for a drink. I stopped asking follow-up questions. Not because I wasn't curious, because I didn't want to sound like someone who didn't trust his own wife. But the savings kept shrinking. I'd open the banking app in quiet moments, waiting in line for coffee, sitting in my car before work, and watch the balance tick downward like sand slipping through fingers. I recalculated our budget twice, 3 times. There was no mistake. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the soft blue glow illuminating the tired lines under my eyes. Maya leaned against the counter, scrolling her phone. "We need to talk about the account," I said gently. Her shoulders stiffened just slightly. "What about it?" "It's down another $4,000. She frowned. "That can't be right." I turned the screen toward her. She glanced at it, then looked away. "I told you I moved some money around," she said, crossing her arms. "You're always tracking every dollar like we're on the brink of collapse." "That's not fair," I replied quietly. "I'm just trying to understand." She exhaled sharply, irritation flashing across her face like a brief storm. "You're acting paranoid. It's temporary. I've got something lined up that's going to pay off." "What something?" She hesitated a fraction too long. "A business opportunity." My stomach tightened. "With who?" "A friend," she said again, more firmly this time. "Why does it matter?" "Because it's our future," I wanted to say. "Because that money was meant to become our home someday. Because I trusted you with it." But I swallowed the words. "Okay," I said instead. "I just want us to be careful." She softened slightly, stepping forward to squeeze my arm. "I know, you worry too much." That night, she fell asleep quickly. I didn't. The following weekend, she mentioned attending an open house. "Just browsing," she said lightly, while applying mascara in the bathroom mirror. "It's fun to look." I smiled. "Already house shopping without me?" She laughed. "Window shopping. Relax." Something tugged at me, a vague sense that pieces weren't lining up. But again, I pushed it aside. Then one afternoon, I ran into our neighbor downstairs, Mrs. Kaplan, while taking out the trash. She peered at me over her glasses with that nosy but kind curiosity older neighbors master. "Your wife's friend seems very successful," she remarked. I blinked. "What friend?" "The tall gentleman who picked her up last week. Fancy car, very polished." My hand tightened around the trash bag. "Oh, that must be a colleague." Mrs. Kaplan nodded. "Maybe. He waited in the car while she ran upstairs. Looked like he was in a hurry." I forced a polite smile and thanked her, then carried the trash to the dumpster with a hollow ache forming behind my ribs. That night, I couldn't help myself. When Maya fell asleep, her phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Evan R. I stared at it longer than I should have. I didn't unlock her phone. I didn't scroll. I just watched the notification fade back into darkness, leaving the room heavier than before. The next week, Maya became distant in ways that hurt more than anger ever could. Short answers. Avoided eye contact. Her laughter sounded forced, like a song played at the wrong speed. One evening, she casually mentioned a real estate seminar she'd attended. "I thought you said you were meeting a friend," I said, trying to sound neutral. "It was a friend from the seminar," she corrected quickly. The lies were stacking now, thin and fragile, like a tower of glass. I started connecting dots I didn't want to see. The unexplained withdrawals, the open houses, the mysterious business opportunity, the late nights, the unfamiliar name glowing on her phone. I didn't sleep much anymore. My dreams were restless, filled with half-formed images of doors closing and empty rooms echoing with footsteps. And then, one Tuesday evening, I came home early. The apartment was unusually quiet. No lights on, no music playing. Maya's shoes were by the door. From the bedroom, I heard voices. Her voice, low, intimate, unfamiliar in its softness, and a man's voice answering her. My hand froze on the doorframe. The air felt suddenly too thin to breathe. I stood there for a moment that stretched into eternity, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. Then I took a step forward. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. A thin line of warm light spilled across the hallway carpet, illuminating a pair of unfamiliar leather shoes beside Maya's heels. My stomach dropped. I didn't rush in. I don't know why. Maybe part of me still hoped my eyes would be wrong, that my ears had misinterpreted something innocent and harmless, but my hands were already trembling as I nudged the door open. They were sitting on the edge of the bed, too close. Maya's hand rested lightly on his knee, fingers curled like they belonged there. The man, tall, well-groomed, wearing a crisp button-down, leaned toward her with the kind of easy confidence that comes from being admired often. They looked up at the same time. For a split second, no one spoke. Maya's face drained of color. Her mouth opened slightly like she was searching for a word that wouldn't come. I felt oddly calm, the kind of numb calm that settles in after something inside you has already broken. "What's going on?" I asked quietly. The man straightened, smoothing his shirt. He glanced at Maya, then back at me. "I should probably go." "No," Maya said quickly. "Wait." Her eyes flicked between us like a trapped animal. I stepped fully into the room. The faint scent of his cologne mixed unpleasantly with the familiar smell of our laundry detergent. It felt like an invasion of something sacred and ordinary. "Who is he?" I asked. She swallowed. "This is Evan." I nodded slowly. "The real estate friend?" Her lips pressed together. Evan cleared his throat. "Look, man, I didn't mean for this to—" "Please," I said softly, holding up a hand. "Just give us a moment." He hesitated, then grabbed his jacket from the chair and slipped past me without meeting my eyes. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving the room painfully quiet. Maya sat frozen on the bed, shoulders slumped, eyes glassy. "How long?" I asked. Tears welled up, spilling over before she could stop them. "It just happened. That's not an answer." She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. "A few months." The words landed like a physical blow. "And the money?" I asked. She looked down at her lap. "I invested some of it with him. He said he could help me flip properties, learn the business." My voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. "You drained our savings for a man you're sleeping with?" She flinched. "I wasn't planning to leave you. It just evolved." I let out a hollow laugh. Funny how betrayal always evolves. She tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. "Why?" I asked. The word carrying years of shared routines, late-night dreams, and quiet trust inside it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I felt invisible. Because I didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck forever. Because he made me feel like something bigger was possible. Something inside me hardened. So I wasn't enough?" "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. "I want a divorce," she said finally, barely audible. The sentence felt surreal, like hearing a foreign language spoken in your own home. I nodded slowly. "Okay." She looked surprised, maybe expecting anger or pleading. Instead, there was only a deep, steady ache. "I'll stay with Evan," she continued. "He's stable, successful." There it was, the unspoken comparison made painfully clear. "I'll pack my things tonight," I said. She blinked. "Tonight? I'm not sleeping here." She didn't stop me. I packed a single suitcase, clothes, my laptop, a framed photo from our first anniversary that I couldn't bring myself to leave behind. Every drawer I opened felt like closing a chapter of my life. Maya stood in the doorway watching, arms wrapped around herself. She didn't cry anymore. She looked relieved. When I reached the front door, she spoke quietly. "You'll be okay. You always land on your feet." I paused, hand on the doorknob. "So did you," I said gently, "until you jumped." Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance. I stepped into the hallway, the door shutting softly behind me. The apartment that had once smelled like citrus shampoo and burnt coffee now felt like a stranger's space. I slept on a friend's couch that night, staring at the ceiling while the hum of traffic filtered through the window. My phone buzzed with messages from Maya. Logistics, practicalities, nothing emotional. The divorce moved quickly. No children, minimal assets left to divide. The savings were mostly gone. What remained barely covered legal fees and deposits. Word spread faster than I expected. Mutual friends chose sides. Some offered sympathy. Others avoided the discomfort altogether. A month later, I learned through a mutual acquaintance that Maya had moved into a high-end condo with Evan. "She seems happy," the friend said carefully. I nodded. Good for her. But inside, something raw and unresolved pulsed quietly. I downsized my life, rented a small studio near work, sold things I didn't need, took on extra shifts, rebuilt my savings slowly, dollar by dollar. I didn't date. I didn't socialize much. I focused on stability, on routine, on quiet progress. Years passed. The hurt dulled into a scar, still tender, but no longer bleeding. And then, one afternoon, my company promoted me into a regional operations role. Better pay, bonuses, real growth. I started investing conservatively, reading late into the night about markets and property, learning patiently, the opposite of shortcuts. 5 years after the night I walked out with a suitcase, I found myself standing in front of a house I was considering buying. A modest but beautiful place in a quiet neighborhood. Sunlight filtered through tall maple trees. The porch railings were freshly painted. The windows reflected the pale blue sky like calm water. Something about it felt grounded. The listing agent unlocked the door and gestured me inside. "This one's been on the market a while," she said. "Previous owners had a rough split." I stepped into the living room and froze. The walls, the layout, the faint dent in the corner of the doorframe. It was Maya's house. The house she had once bragged about moving into after marrying Evan. The house she had lost. My heart began to race. I stood there longer than necessary, pretending to examine the hardwood floors while my mind raced through memories I hadn't touched in years. The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and fresh paint, not the old citrus shampoo and burnt coffee anymore. The furniture was gone. The walls were neutral now, stripped of personality, but the bones of the place were unmistakable. I remembered photos Maya had once shown me on her phone, her excited voice describing our dream staircase and the way the morning light hits the kitchen. Except now, there was no hour. There was only me, standing quietly in a house that once symbolized everything I thought I'd lost. The agent chatted lightly about square footage and school districts. I nodded politely, barely hearing her. My fingers brushed the banister. Smooth, recently refinished, and a strange sense of closure washed over me. "Do you know what happened to the owners?" I asked carefully. She hesitated. "Divorce. Foreclosure followed shortly after. It's been sitting vacant since." I thanked her and continued the walkthrough. Each room felt like stepping into a parallel version of a life I could have lived if I'd been someone else, if trust hadn't been misplaced, if shortcuts hadn't looked so tempting. When I left, the afternoon sun warmed my face. I sat at my car for a long time without starting the engine. I didn't feel revenge. I felt clarity. A month later, I closed on the house. The paperwork was tedious, but satisfying. Signatures stacking neatly, keys sliding into my palm with a quiet weight of finality. It was the first property I'd ever owned, the first thing that felt entirely built by my own patience. Moving in was slow. I bought furniture deliberately instead of impulsively. A solid wooden table, neutral curtains, plants that required responsibility instead of decoration. The house felt peaceful. One Saturday morning, while watering the small front garden, I noticed a car slow down across the street. It pulled over hesitantly. The driver's door opened. Maya stepped out. She looked thinner. Her hair was shorter, styled more practically. The confident polish she once carried was replaced with something cautious, guarded. She stared at the house like someone revisiting a memory they weren't sure was real. Then her eyes landed on me. At first, there was only confusion. Then recognition flickered, slow, hesitant, like a candle catching flame. Her mouth parted slightly. "You?" I set the watering can down gently. "Hi, Maya." She walked closer, disbelief written across her face. "You live here?" "I just moved in," I replied calmly. Her gaze swept across the porch, the windows, the garden. Her voice trembled. This was my house." "I know." Silence stretched between us. A bird chirped somewhere in the trees. The neighborhood hummed quietly behind us. "How?" she finally asked. "I worked, saved, invested carefully." She swallowed. "Evan lost everything after the market shifted. Bad loans, over-leveraged. The house went into foreclosure. We divorced 2 years ago." I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." Looked surprised by the sincerity in my voice. "You don't look bitter," she said quietly. "I was," I admitted, for a while. Her shoulders sagged. "I didn't recognize you at first. You look different. So do you." She offered a faint, sad smile. "I guess life reshapes us." We stood there, two people who once shared a future, now separated by years of choices. "I mocked you," she said suddenly, eyes filling. "I told Evan you were small-minded, broke, afraid to take risks." The words stung, but only faintly now. "I believed shortcuts were smarter than patience," she continued. "I was wrong." I met her gaze steadily. "We all learn differently." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm glad you got the house," she whispered. "It deserves someone who'll take care of it." I nodded. "I will." She lingered a moment longer, then stepped back toward her car. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. "You too, Maya." She drove away slowly, glancing once more in the rearview mirror before disappearing down the street. I stood there long after she left, the quiet wrapping around me like a soft blanket. It wasn't victory I felt, it was peace. The house settled into my life the way a deep breath settles into your lungs after a long climb. Steady, grounding, quietly miraculous. I learned its rhythms the way you learn a new song, which floorboard creaked near the hallway at night, How the afternoon sun warmed the kitchen tiles just enough to make barefoot mornings feel indulgent. The way rain sounded different on the roof than it ever had in my old apartment. Softer, fuller, like a slow drumbeat reminding me that time kept moving whether I rushed or not. Sometimes, while washing dishes or trimming the hedges, a memory would float up uninvited. Maya laughing in our old kitchen, her excitement over open house photos, the way she once said she wanted a life that felt like momentum. But the memories no longer cut, they simply passed through, like clouds. I began hosting small dinners for friends, something I'd avoided for years while rebuilding. The smell of garlic and roasted vegetables filled the kitchen. Laughter bounced off walls that had once stood empty and silent. It felt good to share something I had earned patiently, brick by brick. One evening, after everyone left and the dishes were stacked neatly to dry, I sat alone at the wooden table I'd chosen carefully months earlier. The lamp cast a warm pool of light across the grain of the wood. I traced it absently with my finger and reflected on how differently life unfolds when you stop chasing shortcuts and start honoring consistency. Maya wasn't a villain in my story anymore. She was someone who wanted more than she understood how to build, and I had been someone who mistook loyalty for invisibility. We had both learned, just in different currencies. Occasionally, mutual acquaintances would mention her. She'd moved to a smaller town, started working in property management, steady, modest, stable. There was no scandal left, no gossip worth repeating, just a quiet continuation of two separate lives. I didn't feel triumph over her loss. I felt gratitude for the lesson. Slow growth compounds. Trust matters more than ambition without discipline, and dignity survives even betrayal if you protect it. The house became more than walls and windows. It became proof, not to anyone else, but to myself, that resilience didn't need applause. It only needed patience. Some nights, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, still slightly burnt out of habit, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Neighbors walked their dogs. A child practiced riding a bike, wobbling bravely down the sidewalk while a parent jogged alongside with open arms. Life wasn't dramatic anymore. It was honest, and that felt like wealth. I never remarried. Quickly, I dated slowly, cautiously, with clearer boundaries and quieter expectations. When someone asked about my past, I didn't tell the story with bitterness, only with honesty. I learned how to rebuild, I'd say. That was the gift, because in the end, losing everything I thought defined me forced me to discover what actually did: integrity, patience, self-respect, and the courage to start again without resentment. If there's one thing I hope anyone listening takes from this, it's this: not every loss is punishment. Some losses are redirection. Some doors close so you can finally learn how to build your own house instead of waiting to be invited into someone else's dream. Would you have handled betrayal with patience, or would you have chased revenge? If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need a quiet reminder that slow victories often last the longest.